the Bane Free Radio Hour.
Hello and welcome to the Bane Free Radio Hour. Today on the show, Hailey H.Y. Gregor interviews Kacey Ezell about Magelight, the first in her fantasy series of the same name. After that, we bring you part 10 of the serialization of Mark Van Name's John and Lobo novel, One Jump Ahead.
All right, the countdown is complete, which means that we are live recording.
Blasting off.
Yep, here we go. Not quite that exciting, but we can try. That's why we're here to entertain.
That's right.
Welcome, guys, back to another episode of the Bane Free Radio Hour. As usual, I'm Hailey H.Y. Gregor, and joining me today, once again, is none other than Kacey Ezell. She is Bane's resident dragon writer, and we're here. Yes. She's also the author of the exciting new fantasy novel Magelight, which is coming out on May 6th. So we have a beautiful example there. Yes.
Yeah, a little product placement for you.
Yeah. Please go buy my book.
Yes,
Kacey, how are you doing?
I'm awesome, thanks. How are you?
I am hanging in there. I'm actually really excited to talk to you about this one. First, this is, as we were just talking about before the recording, your first solo novel with Bane. And it is also, I believe, your first fantasy novel. Is that correct?
Yes, unless, wait, let me think about this for a second. Yes, as far as like sword and sorcery or epic fantasy or like the traditional forms of fantasy, I've had fantasy elements in other books of mine. Like my Psyche series has psychic women in it, but those are more like of a contemporary setting. Well, contemporary for 1943, but it's, you know, our world, and this is fantasy. It's like
third world fantasy, I think.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
So you started out a lot of your career with a lot of military science fiction. What is, if you want to talk to readers who are normally maybe expecting that from you, talk to us through the process and the reasoning behind jumping into fantasy, which I think is excellent, but I'm biased.
Well, so the truth is, like I read science fiction growing up, but my heart really drew me more towards fantasy. And so as a reader, I am much more of a fantasy reader than I am a sci-fi reader. I still read sci-fi, and I still love sci-fi, but but I'm more of a fantasy reader. And so if you've been following my career at all, you know that I have I identify as genre fluid, right? Is my running joke, because I have a real severe case of genre ADHD in that, like, I can't just pick a lane. I'm sorry, I'm all over the place. But I'm not really sorry, because I love these stories, right? And, you know, so I get these ideas, and, you know, they exist in a sci-fi setting, or they exist in a fantasy setting, or they exist in, you know, an alternate history setting. And I run with them. And so, I didn't set out to say, okay, now it's time to write a fantasy novel and then write Magelight. That's not how it worked. What happened was, is that the characters kind of, you know, developed in my brain. The scenario of them kind of developed in my brain, due in part to a lot of other stuff that I was reading, which is always the case, right? Like, we're influenced by, you know, what we read, what we write, the games we play, all that kind of stuff. And so, you know, once I had the characters, it was obvious that they were in a fantasy setting, mostly because the first character that really sort of like revealed herself to me was the main character, Hailey, and she's a sorceress. So it's not saying that you can't have sci-fi sorcerers, but she was a very traditional, like, fantasy sorceress, a la, you know, D&D or sword and sorcery books, or, you know, whatever. So yeah, in some ways she's kind of non-traditional.
It definitely felt like, in a lot of ways, and we'll get to this, but in a lot of ways it did feel like a very classic fantasy adventure, like third world fantasy story. Yeah. So what were any of your really specific inspirations, or actually what were, when you were a kid, some of your favorite fantasy books that like drew you into the genre?
So you'll like this because this is going to segue nicely to the question you almost asked. so, I loved David Eddings's the Belgariad series and the Malloreon series, which are classic, 80s 90s fantasy, with the quest storyline and the main character who's a young dumb kid who doesn't know anything and is the chosen one but has no idea that he's the chosen one. But the thing that really was compelling to me about those two series, because they're related, right? The Malloreon is a sequel series to the Belgariad. The thing that was compelling to me about those was the characters and the character interaction as a party, because that's what they do, right? Like they have to, spoiler alert for a, I don't know, 30-something, 40-something-year-old series. But there's a prophecy, and the prophecy says that they have to gather like these certain like archetypal figures, including the chosen one, but it's not just the chosen one, right? He also has these supporting characters in the prophecy, and so part of the storyline is collecting all of these characters and identifying them and bringing them together into this party to go do the thing and face the mad god kind of thing. And I loved that, right? I loved the party dynamics, the relationships between the characters. There were a couple of characters in particular who have direct direct influence on my characters in Magelight, just because I kind of fell in love with them in my 13-year-old heart, or whatever, however old I was when I read those. So yeah, so that's one. Trying to think of some others. Later as an adult, another, like I fell in love with a couple of other fantasy authors' work, namely Guy Gavriel Kay, who is still publishing. I think he's got a book coming out same month as Magelight, so you should go check that out because it's amazing, I'm sure. But his I believe it was his first trilogy. Don't quote me on that, but it's called the Fionavar Tapestry, and it is also like a very classic third world. Well, actually, it's second world fantasy because it's kind of a portal fantasy, but it has a lot of like the classic fantasy elements. Draws heavily from, like, I don't want to say it draws from Tolkien necessarily, but it draws from the sort of Tolkien-esque archetypes, and a lot of Arthurian archetypes and a lot of mythology and stuff, which is all, I thought all of that was very cool. And once again, he writes these characters. For me, it's always the characters. It's the characters, the interaction, the dynamics between them. So that was a big influence. Sharon Shin, who I was delighted to get a pull quote from for this. If you wanted to hear like the biggest fangirl squeak ever, there it was. But
would you reenact that for us?
No, because it'd break the electronics. But yeah, no, she's a fantastic author. Her female characters are probably some of my favorite of all time because she has a knack of writing like characters who are both tough and powerful and also like really feminine and and vulnerable at times when it's appropriate, right? So they feel like real people to me. They feel like real women that I know or that like I am, you know what I mean? So yeah, a lot of influence from her as well. So yeah,
real women, almost like they're people.
Right. Yeah.
Little things.
I can hear Marisa Wolf going, turns out women are people.
Well, and we'll have her on here shortly too, because Bane, you guys are exploding with fantasy this year. It's a really exciting time. So
yeah, fantasy's definitely having a moment. Yeah, and I'm excited that Bane has given us this opportunity to kind of really kind of get in on it. So
yeah, no, it's going to be a big year. I'm looking forward to it. Okay, so the question that I was going to ask, because when I asked you about fantasy that you used to enjoy, or not that you used to enjoy, but that you enjoyed early on, I expected Pern, but we all know that there is a large debate about Pern's genre. So bringing up
According
genres.
to Anne McCaffrey, Pern is sci-fi. So that's why I didn't include Pern.
But you don't know that at first when you start reading it, right? Like the first
Right.
couple books. Yeah,
it definitely
we were
reads
misled.
like fantasy for sure.
Yeah. But so talking about genres then, what genre? It's actually, briefly, can you give me like a 2-sentence rundown? What is Magelight about for people who maybe haven't read the back cover copy or taken a look yet?
Absolutely. Yeah. So Magelight is a fantasy adventure novel about a sorceress who all her life has been told she's not good enough, and finally decides one day the hell with it, and runs away, and in doing so finds a way to seize her own power if she has the courage to do so. So it's on one level, so that's the pitch, right? Like that's my elevator pitch. I'm not gonna go on.
That's perfect.
But in terms of genre, I would categorize it as a fantasy adventure novel. That being said, there is a heavy romantic subplot that is integral to the plot of the book, and it is also a romantic subplot where the heroine has 3 male love interests and doesn't have to choose between them. So that is something that I think people may kind of be like, whoa, about. But I promise it makes sense in the context of the story. So that's for that reason, people have asked me, well, is it a romantasy? And I would, the reason that I don't characterize it as romantasy is very simply because the central question of the story is not, are these people gonna end up together, or are they not? That's part of that romantic subplot that I talked about, and it's again important to the story, but it's not the central question. The central question is, can Ailys grow up enough to make her own choices and accept the consequences of them, and in doing so seize her own power? So it's really a novel about growing up in a lot of ways.
So not romantasy, not a fantasy romance. And
you could maybe call it that, but yeah, I just call it a fantasy adventure with a romantic subplot.
Faster. Well, so then there was a third genre that you had mentioned potentially, or a third element that was reverse harem, which is that piece you said people might kind of raise their eyebrows about. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I found really interesting, so true confession time, one of my guilty pleasures in reading is actually reading reverse harem romances. And it isn't necessarily because of the smut, although the smut is often excellent if that's your jam. The thing that always fascinates me is the intersection of the relationship dynamic between the female and her individual male love interest, but also like the, how do the male love interests interact with each other? And sometimes in reverse harem, there are people who will split these hairs and call it like, oh, well, if it's a polyamorous reverse harem, then the dudes are into each other too. Yeah, and that's true sometimes. That's not the case in this one. But I've always been fascinated by the idea of these are men who have a significant bond with each other, whether it be because of like a brotherhood bond or a trauma bond, like they've been through some shit together, or whatever, any number of reasons, because male friendships are I love it when they're explored in fiction, and I think that's something that maybe we don't see as often as we used to. Certainly because like I said, that was one of the things I loved about Eddings's work was the exploration of the relationships between all the characters in this adventuring party. And I'm a tabletop role-playing gamer, and I love playing D&D. I have an ongoing game right now. It's amazing. It's so much fun. And one of my favorite parts of that, again, is the interrelationships between the individual members of the party. So going back to the idea of reverse harem, I was like, well, what would make sense, right? Because most guys that I know would not be okay sharing their love interest with another dude, right? But what would be something that made sense to my brain? Like, okay, well, this was a reason why it would work. why. And part of it is magic, because again, it's a fantasy world. And part of it is just that, that deep, like, brothers in arms bond that they have with one another, so, but, yeah, so that's, I'm hoping, I'm hoping it doesn't turn people off too much, that people will at least give it a chance, because, I really do like these characters. I love this storyline. I'm very proud of it. And I think people, if you like rollicking fantasy adventure, it's going to be your jam.
So for research purposes, you were reading, I guess, a lot of your guilty pleasure books. Was there any other research you did?
Not in terms of having 3 boyfriends, no.
I'm sure your husband would have thoughts about that.
Right. I'm very, very happily monogamous in my real life. my friend Marisa, who you also know, Hailey, Marisa and I have this ongoing joke about how we are far too monogamous for this conversation in real life.
And yet here
often
we are.
Because, like, yeah, well, no, it usually comes up because we're always together, and so sometimes people think that we're like actually a couple, especially when we go out in public with my daughter, because Marisa lives nearby, so they think we're her mom. So we're like, no, we're both happily married to men.
Well, so what's the draw for you to that genre specifically?
Again, like I said, it's the character interactions, the character dynamics, right?
Different.
I find it interesting. Yeah. It's part of that escapism is not that it's just exploring character dynamics that don't really exist in, at least not in my real world. Maybe they do in someone's real world, but
not often seen in the wild.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's probably a better way to put it.
All right. So you had mentioned then, we'll jump ahead to some other influences for this story, because I think this part is great. Tabletop RPGs, Dungeons and Dragons. I know you play some video game RPGs also.
Yep.
How did that build your characters? What were some of the draws that you used? Because you had some good ideas.
Yeah. So what I wanted to do is, when I was asking myself this question about, okay, how would this dynamic go? The first sort of structure that occurred to me was that of a D&D adventure party, a fantasy adventure party, right? Where you have, you have a warrior, you have a ranger, archer type, and you have your like thief rogue archetype, and then you have your caster. And that's exactly who my characters are in Magelight. And the part of the relationship that I set up between the male main characters really has a lot to do with their backstory of, they knew each other as children, and then they were violently separated, traumatically separated from each other and from everything that they knew, and went on these 3 separate paths to gain expertise in those various ways, those various areas, right? So, my warrior character Romik he was sold into a gladiatorial arena and was an arena fighter for years until he earned his freedom because he got so good. And then he was like, well, I don't know how to do anything else. So he joined a mercenary company as a soldier, which is a very different kind of fighting, but he learned how to do that too. The archer character, he found himself a member of the Imperial Forestry Service, where he learned all of these woodcraft skills and all of these archery skills and got very, very good at it, but was really ostracized by the other members of the organization because he didn't have the right kind of noble background. And so that really informed sort of his outlook on things. And he's my spite character, right? Like the reason he's so good is strictly out of spite, because he's like, oh, you think you're better than me? I'll show you how much better than you I can be at everything. So, and then, my thief character found himself homeless, a homeless kid on the streets of a big city, and ended up a pickpocket and part of the Thieves Guild, and got good because, for all 3 of them, the common theme is you get good or you don't survive. And all 3 of them chose to survive, right? Which is a theme that sort of we kind of see playing out in real time in the story with the female main character, Alis, right? It's okay, well, get good or you don't survive, you know? And it's about, well, what does she have to do in order to get good at what she does, which is casting magic. So
Well, and she goes through, all of the characters go through pretty significant arcs as far as like their resilience and the things that they learn. But Alis, especially, you said it was kind of a growing up story. She's not. It's not like a coming of age story, right? Because she's not. It's not like a YA novel. But
no.
talk to me a little bit about her growth. Was there anything? I don't know, any self insert there, or were you working on like something really specific? Was something you were trying to say with the things that she learns?
No, yeah, there's absolutely some self-insert there, right? Like I, you know, at the risk of being a little bit vulnerable, I will say that there are days when I am really, really mean to myself. And the voice in my head that talks to me is just vicious. And that's the voice that I tapped into to be the voice in Alis's head. So, you know, she's a young woman from a powerful family. In this world, the magic is strictly the province of the nobility, because if you had magic, you were able to seize power, is basically how it is, right? So she's from a very powerful noble family that has a long history of creating very powerful sorcerers and sorceresses. Only she struggles to wield even the tiniest bit of magic, and so because of that, her self-esteem, her entire life, everyone's, you know, been telling her, oh, you're not living up to your potential, you're not good enough, why aren't you're not trying hard enough, you're, you know, all of that kind of thing. And I think a lot of us at some point in our lives have heard that, right? Like, well, if you would just try a little harder, if you would just focus, if you would just, you know, you have so much potential and you're letting it go to waste. So I really tried to kind of like pull from that experience. And, you know, what does that do to someone when you feel that and you internalize that your entire life? And then all of a sudden, the thing that was making it hard for her to channel magic, either she breaks through that or she doesn't survive. And spoiler alert, she breaks through it. But now she has all this power, but she also has these men who are an integral part of it that, you know, that are now bound to her. How does she reconcile those things? And at the end of the day, you know, thematically, the answer is you grow up and you accept that choices have consequences, and that even if you have the best intentions, sometimes the things that you do are going to have negative consequences on people. So
I think that's a really powerful message, and it's going to resonate pretty well. That and the despite success, which I love, because I think we've all been there a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you think that there's anything?
Superpower for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think there's anything really specific that readers are going to resonate with in the characters, or something you hope that they'll resonate with your characters?
I hope that readers will. I hope that they'll see their own like growth arcs as humans, because we all have them, right? I hope that they'll see those in Alis. I hope that they'll see, you know, the way that the men interact with her, and their sort of like protective instincts. That again, some of it's magically induced, some of it's just their natural. You know, the way that these men are for people who are weaker than them. I think that will resonate with a lot of my notes, because, you know, coming from a military science fiction background, my audience, as it is right now, runs pretty high to men who have some sort of like either military or first responder, or, you know, some sort of service oriented advocation or vocation, either one or the other. And so I think that will resonate with them. I also think that I hope to reach out to some of the women who like to read romantasy, because there are such heavy romantic elements in this. And I hope that they'll read this and enjoy the relationship dynamics as well. And the fact that while Alis she's not a kick-ass heroine, she can do some cool stuff, but she just really doesn't believe in herself, but she's growing too, right? And I hope that they'll enjoy that arc as well.
As I was reading it, there were definitely glimmers that future storyline, there would be her growing in her magical powers a lot. So I think the seeds to that are laid really well. Rewinding a little.
I hope to.
Oh, go ahead. So when you game, what class do you like to play? Who is Kacey Ezell?
So most of the time I often play a rogue character because I find them amazing and fun and fascinating, and who doesn't want to pretend to run around and stab people in the back sometimes?
Steal stuff, pick locks,
and steal stuff, right? It's, the allure of I don't want to be an amoral person in my real life, so I'd be an amoral person in my fantasy life. But right now, actually, in our ongoing campaign, I'm playing a warlock who has a level in rogue. Of course. And that's been a lot of fun too, because again, it's playing the interesting relationship dynamic between the character and her patron, who she doesn't know anything about at this point in the game. So
welcome back.
Thank you.
We're happy to have you.
Sorry about that. My earbuds died.
No worries. All right, so your warlock character, are you, I'm assuming, one of those people that builds out like a big backstory for your characters before you play them?
Oftentimes I do. I didn't this time though, because I kind of wanted to discover it as I went along, but you will find it funny because I've mentioned Maurice Wolf several times in this podcast already. She lives, a couple miles down the road from me. She's pretty much my bestie. We hang out all the time, and she's in our D&D group. And sure enough, our characters also besties.
Oh, art mirrors life.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Gaming mirrors life.
Okay, so with your character, oh, go ahead.
No,
sorry. So I recently had a speaker, Rob Hampson, on to talk about his most recent release, and he had a number of noticeable Tuckerizations, characters that he had either named after real world people, or you could tell by their personality that they were real people, which is always a lot of fun. Did you have anything like that, or characters modeled off specific?
I don't, but what I did do is so a lot of when I'm showing an emotional connection between characters, one of the techniques I like to do a lot is talk about voice inflection and, kind of the oral quality of someone's voice. And I very specifically gave all of my characters like very distinct voices. And I recently went through and realized who exactly they sound like. So, my warrior character of Romic has a very like gravelly voice, and if you've ever watched Ted Lasso, the actor who plays Roy Kent,
I'm guessing Roy, yeah.
yeah, I heard him and I was like, oh my god, it's Romic. So that's Romic's voice. Dane, actually, his voice is another character from Ted Lasso, which is a show I'm obsessed with right now. And it's without the like real strong regional accent, but it's the voice of the actor who plays Jamie Tart, who is another footballer in that show. And then Vil, my thief character, he looks like the actor Charlie Hunnam, who he played Jax on Sons of Anarchy. I don't know what it is about British actors, but apparently that's who is playing all of but
in fantasy movies, they always have British accents. They're always English, so
yeah, for sure, yeah. No, he looks like Charlie Hunnam, but he sounds like Tom Hiddleston.
Okay.
Yeah.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
is actually
sexy.
really cool.
I mean, I'm not going to pretend that I didn't make them sexy, because I did, right? Like, strong romantic subplot.
And it's fantasy for a reason.
Right. Yeah.
All the fantasy, the different kinds.
That's right. I do want to be clear about one thing, though. So when I mention this, like, I do think romantasy readers, I want to say romantasy girlies, because that's what I hear on, like, TikTok and Instagram all the time, but it's not just women who read romantasy. I know that. But I do think romantasy readers will like this, but there is no actual sex on the page in this book. And I did that very deliberately for reasons that I won't go into because of spoilers. But
Yes.
Again, it has to do with issues of choice and consent and yeah, so no sex on the page. And I really wanted to dig into like tension, that relationship dynamic tension between characters when there is definite attraction there, but for one reason or another you can't act on it. What do you do? How do you handle that? So,
and it's sort of a will they won't they in some ways. But the fact that it's not almost makes the tension more, I think, if that makes sense.
That question exists. It's just not the central question of the story. Yeah.
Yeah. But a lot of the times it feels very inevitable. And so you're like waiting for it. And then it doesn't happen and you're still waiting for it. So that was well done.
So this might not be 100% appropriate, but I have heard this work and the sequel that I'm in the process of writing called literary edging.
That's on the cover, I'm assuming.
No, that was in a text message from Marisa Wolf when I was like sending her, because she alpha reads for me, right? So I'll send her snippets of it as I finish them. Her and Melissa Altoff, but who's also writing a book for Baen and well, has written one and is writing a sequel, which maybe I wasn't supposed to say. Sorry, surprise. But
sorry, Griffin.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess Melissa told Marisa in a text message, like, Kacey keeps sending me these scenes, and then I get to the end and there's no more, and it's like literary edging. So.
Well, it sounds like mission accomplished. That's what you wanted.
I'll take it, right? I'll definitely take it. So, that one might go on the Instagram reel targeting the romantasy readers.
Actually, that's perfect. Yes, that's really good marketing. Or you keep doing the things with the arrows, the graphics with the arrows. You should put that on.
Yeah, literary edging.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe. We'll see.
Disclosure, not actually romantasy, but thinks it is.
Right. That's right. That's right.
All right. So I remember talking to you as you were writing this and how excited you were about so much of it. Mm-hmm. What, without spoiling anything, were there any scenes that you particularly loved writing that you're like excited for people to get to?
Yes. There are two in particular. The first one is a scene between Alice and Vil at an inn when they discover a new fun trick she can do with her magic that is kind of a game changer, but also like has some physiological ramifications.
I know that scene. I remember.
Yeah, that scene was really fun to write. I really enjoyed that one because it was like there was a lot of emotion involved in it, right? Like emotion is so central to really it's central to the magic in this story. And so that that was really fun to play with. And then the second one is a scene oddly between the same two characters that I have.
So who are your favorite characters?
Vil is 100% my favorite character, and I shouldn't have favorites because I love them all. But he's the most fun to write because he's that. So like what I was talking about Eddings and his series, he had two characters that I, in my teenage girl soul, just absolutely 100% fell for, and that was the character of Silk, or Prince Kaldar as his alias, and the character of Zakath, the Emperor, and both of them for the same reason, because they were polite and urbane and funny, but underneath all of that, like you could see where they could flip a switch and almost become sociopathic, and like not in terms of like just eminently practical, right? Willing to do whatever it took. And for some reason that resonated with me. Like that, I think that was probably the start of my bad boy addiction in fantasy, in books, you know, like in general, right? Like I love those male characters who are eminently competent, eminently practical, willing to do whatever it takes, right? It's a very compelling archetype for a reason. And there's some of that in all three of these guys, right? They're all, like I said, they're all really good at what they do. They're all willing to do whatever it takes. There's another scene that I wrote featuring Dane, where basically everybody else, like there's an explosion and everybody else is down and out, and he's the first to wake up, and the only thing he can think about is you know, he's got to find his bow because that's his weapon. Find the bow, get to the girl, protect the girl. You know, he's like all banged up. He can't even put weight on one leg. And that was really, I loved writing that one too, because it allowed me to illustrate just how far, you know, these men would go to protect the girl in their charge. And like what that would do, what that did to them. So yeah. But yeah, I love them all. But Bill's my favorite.
So what was the other Bill scene?
Oh, the other Bill scene was the sexiest drink of water ever. So
there's more of your literary edge.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, a lot of tension.
What when you had got your like early feedback from your ARC readers and your alpha readers and stuff, what were some of the best things that they have told you about it? Like your favorite feedback?
Well,
besides the
some
letter,
of it was yours, actually.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it was, because so I sent it to you, right? You were one of my beta readers. Thank you for doing that. And I had a scene where I needed to show Aelis's mother, who is not like the villain of the piece, but she's definitely a villainous character.
Yes.
And I needed to show her being just gross and irredeemable, you know? And the feedback I got from you was like, I can see what you're doing here, but I think you're going about it the wrong way, and it makes it almost cartoonish. It makes it almost like laughable. And so I found that really, really valuable feedback. And so because of that, I was able to kind of go in and look at it from a slightly different angle and change it up a little bit, and changed up the scene and made it a ton better, which, you know, you validated when I sent it to you, and you were like, yeah, this is better. So thank you for that. But yeah, that was some of it. I also, the other thing that I really wanted to do is, so one of the pitfalls of reading a lot of reverse harem is you read about a lot of dudes who are written by women, and you know, these are very skilled authors, but sometimes the men don't really feel like actual men. They feel like fantasy men, right? Which is fine, because that's what everyone's reading for. But I wanted these guys to feel like real guys, right? I wanted that to resonate with the male readers. I wanted them to feel like, you know, yeah, this is how a dude thinks. This is how a dude would react. This is how a dude would interact with, you know, with a woman that he cared about, or with, you know, a man that he cared about as his brother, as his comrade in arms, etc. And so I specifically sought out a couple of men of our acquaintance, specifically Dave Shadoin, who I think you know, and Nick Steverson, who you also know, but not quite as well. And they both of them gave me really excellent feedback on things that I never would have thought about, right? You know, like things like the way that the guys talk to each other, things that they would notice about each other, because you know, again, turns out I don't think like a dude. So it was very, very helpful to have that resource to be able to reach out and ask those guys for that support, and they were great.
I actually think that's great, because there are so many jokes about men writing women, right? Like there's a whole subreddit called Men Writing Women.
Right. She breasted boogly.
Yes. And so like the inverse, you know, it doesn't get talked about near as much. And one of the things that I read recently was that it's more okay to have a brooding grumpy male character in a book as opposed to a brooding male in real life is that oftentimes in fiction you're in their head, and so there's like a little narrator saying this is why he's brooding, so it makes
and you
it
can understand
understandable
it, and it makes it relatable. Yeah. Whereas
yeah
in real life, you're like, wow, that guy's just a moody asshole.
yeah
Yeah.
but I think that kind of like you reaching out specifically saying, hey, this is a, you know, a weakness, not even a weakness, this is a difference that I have, and trying
Yeah.
to make that really realistic is awesome.
A blind spot really is what it
Yeah.
is, you know, because I have a female brain. I think like a woman because
Yeah.
I am a woman.
Well, so with that, what are you most excited for readers to see? And we've touched about some of the other things that you're excited about or that you enjoyed the most, but
Yeah.
as far as like going out to the masses, what's super cool about that?
I just, you know, I hope that this book can get in front of the people who are going to love it, because I know that the people who are going to love it are out there, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, like every author I had, you know, you write, there's always a point in your writing. It's a truism, right? There's a point in your writing where you're like, this is trash. No one's going to read this. No one's going to like this. No one, you know. And one of the reasons I'm so grateful for the alpha readers that I do have is because, you know, when I expressed that to them, you know, I had Melissa, specifically Melissa Olthoff. She was like, no, stop. I want to read this. Like, I am the target audience for this book. There are hundreds of women out there who want to read this for me, you know, who are just like me, who want to read this, because, you know, so romantasy is huge right now. And this is another reason why, like, I do really want to reach out to the romantasy readers and invite them to check Magelight out, because romantasy is huge. But on a lot of like the discussion groups and, you know, in Facebook and on Instagram and comments and stuff, there's always at least a couple of readers who are like, I liked this book, you know, I loved the character interaction. I just wish there would have been a little bit more fantasy. If you're one of those readers who wants a little more fantasy in your romantasy, this is the book for you, because, you know, that's really what I was trying to do. I mean, I was just trying to tell my character's story, but that's what I ended up doing, right? It's a fantasy novel that has a strong romantic subplot that I think is, you know, is exactly what people are going to want. So,
And the plot probably is a little bit more intricate than what a lot of the romantasy stuff is, because I know that can sometimes be a little lighter.
yeah,
and you've got
that's,
hints
I mean,
at all kinds of stuff in the story.
yeah, yeah, and this is, you know, this is a we talk about this on panels at conventions all the time, or not all the time, but a couple times, right? Like, what is romantasy, right? And romantasy is a romance novel that is set in a fantasy setting that has fantasy elements that are integral to the romance plot. So that means that the central question is, will they get together or won't they get together? This is kind of almost the inverse of that. This is a fantasy novel that has romance that is integral to the plot, but it isn't the central question. And the romance serves to kind of highlight that central question, if that makes sense. So, yeah.
All right, so I'm going to ask the big question.
Okay.
How do you envision Magelight proceeding?
Well, I have plans for 3 more books in this series. And my hope is that they will do well enough to justify spinning off into other related series within the same universe and world, because I have at least one idea already in the making for a fun spin-off series. But
and I need dragons.
Yeah, with dragons. Yeah, for sure. Pirate dragons, actually.
Yes.
So you can, you know, put that in your bank and muddle on it if you want. But yeah, it's my plan is to basically do 3 more books, and they will each of them will, in each one, we'll sort of learn a little bit more about each of the men's kind of backstories and what brought them to be who they are, and answer some of the questions of all this kind of stuff. Plus, there will be intrigue and politics and battles, and we'll see some characters get their comeuppance eventually. So,
when that happens. Were there any parts that were really hard to write, or like either felt like a slog to get through, or you struggled to feel like it was coming together the right way?
So I will be honest with you. One of the things that I have personally had to really work to develop is my skill at writing fight scenes. I am surrounded by so many people who write such good fight scenes, and I have been really spoiled to like write books with those people, so I can usually be like, hey, here's a fight scene, that's all you're so good at these. and so having to learn how to kind of write a fight scene, and specifically like a fantasy adventure fight scene or a sword and sorcery fight scene, because they're different, right? Like you focus on, and not just in terms of the weaponry used, but like it's almost like the point of view is different, and the way that you relate a sci-fi battle, whether it be a space battle, you do a space battle one way, you do like a gun battle another way, and it's again, it's not just the weaponry, it's not just the techniques used, it's the distance or the point of view from which you're telling it. One of the best at writing this type of fight scene, this sort of like sword and sorcery fight scene, was the late Howard Andrew Jones, who was amazing at it. And if you haven't read, if you're a fantasy adventure fan, a sword and sorcery fan, and you haven't read the Chronicles of Hanavar, go purchase it immediately after watching this, because it's so good. But I was actually privileged to sit in on it was like a virtual seminar that Howard did with a couple of us, about writing epic fight scenes like that. And we looked at examples from like Fritz Liebner and from like Lee Brackett and from Robert Howard, classics like Conan, like the Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser, those kind of fight scenes. And we looked at the specific techniques that they used, that those authors used to, and it wasn't just fight scenes, right? It was just about like their various storytelling techniques overall. But Howard was such a good teacher. Anyway, one of the things that I learned from him was the specific technique of telling a fight scene, specifically like a sword fight scene or a sword and sorcery fight scene, where you start in like with a real close camera angle on the action, and then you kind of pan out and almost summarize the middle of it, and then you finish with the finishing blow. You know what I mean? And so doing that it gives it that that feel that sword and sorcery readers will really recognize. So that's one of the things that I tried to do, but it was definitely a learning process, because I didn't know that. Like I had that conversation with him after I'd written the first draft of Magelight. So that was something that I had to go in editing and kind of like, okay, let me rewrite this with this in mind, making it feel a little bit more appropriate or correct, I guess. Does that make sense? Yeah. So.
Yeah, fight scenes are real tough, because you can get down into the intricacies really quick and get bogged down.
And it can kill your pacing, right?
Yeah.
But then if you don't get into it enough, then people are like, well, what the hell happened? Like, where's my Capo Ferro? Where's my Benetti's defense? So.
Really, readers are probably just bloodthirsty. Give me the details.
Yeah, it's not. It's not that different than the smut readers, actually. It's
that makes sense.
Everybody wants. Yeah, you want the emotion of the scene, and you want the bodily fluids, whatever they happen to be.
Well, and that probably feeds into you can't always make everyone happy, because I know people who say there's a fight scene and I just skip it because they don't like reading it at all, or they want it to be lyrical and not technical. Or the inverse, where they're like, I love this. Larry Correa readers come to mind when they love getting into all of the specs and the details, about the firearms and stuff.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, and it's knowing the audience too, because again, when you're writing a gun battle, the gun fu guys, they want that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Sword guys, they don't necessarily want the cut by cut. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, it's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I don't envy you the task. I'm sure that was a lot.
I mean, it was good. It was fun to learn. It's fun, it's fun to grow in that way. But it was definitely a process, and one that I'm still engaged in. Right, in the sequel that I'm working on right now, I have some sparring going on a ship that I've got to figure out how to write. So,
go watch Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, I was gonna say, gonna go watch some Pirates of the Caribbean to see how that works.
Yeah, or the second, 300 movie. There's a lot of seafaring.
I never saw that one.
There's a lot of seafaring in that one as well, and it might be more appropriate as far as like the time period or like the weapons.
Kind of ancient worldish.
Yeah, it's research. It counts.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, Kacey, thank you so much for your time. It's a pleasure as always. Where can we find you both in person and on the interwebs later this year?
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So Magelight comes out May 6th. I will be, you can find me on the internet at www.kaceyezell.net or .com. Either one will get you there. That's my website. It's got all of my like links and everything on it. All of my books. You can join my membership as a free member and get some free short stories, and also like a newsletter where you'll keep up with what's going on with me. You can also find Magelight. Actually, you can get it. I don't know when this is coming out, but you can get it right now in eARC on Baen.com. And I'm going to have I actually have a prequel short story to Magelight going up on Baen.com at some point. I'm not sure when. So you guys can look forward to that too. That one will be, I believe it's totally free on Baen.com. So yeah, check that out and see if that sounds like something that you might be interested in. And then as far as in person, I will be at LibertyCon in June in Chattanooga, Tennessee. I will be at Lit RPG Con in Denver in July because, as I mentioned, I have a serious case of genre ADHD, and then I will be at DragonCon in December. No, not December.
September.
When is DragonCon?
August, September.
Thank you.
Labor Day.
Yeah, Labor Day weekend. I'll be at DragonCon, and I may have one more. I may have one more appearance, but it's not final yet. So join my newsletter and you'll find out.
Incentive. Find out when it drops, guys.
If it's happening. So, yeah.
Excellent. Well, congratulations again on your first solo fantasy, your first solo Baen book. It's very exciting stuff.
Thank you for beta reading for me and giving me all that wonderful feedback.
Oh, thank you for trusting me to read for you.
Yeah, of course.
Finding readers is hard.
Yeah. So,
as a reminder, everyone, Magelight comes out on May 6th. It is available for pre-order if this comes out before May 6th, so go check it out. It's going to be in hardcover, ebook, available on Baen.com, and audio is also in the works, correct?
Audio is coming. It is coming.
Yes, so we'll do that, and then it will have, I'm assuming, a paperback release at some point in the future. Yeah. So go check it out.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
And now, as promised, one jump ahead. John Moore is a nanotech-enhanced soldier of fortune. Lobo is an AI, a living weapons and intelligence platform of enormous destructive potential. Two very dangerous wolves in a galaxy of deadly corporate and paramilitary predators. But Moore has grown weary of the killing, and just once he'd like to finish a job without leaving a trail of blood behind him. Not going to happen. Not on a pristine planet called Macon, where two gigantic corporations vie for control of the local jump gate and access to the riches of an undeveloped world. Dealing with a kidnapping and extortion scheme is only the beginning for Moore and Lobo as they work to stay one jump ahead.
How many more are at the camp? 13 humans, one of whom is in a tent and has a smaller IR signature than the rest. That is likely the target. A fire is burning. There is also a board media recorder which will not shut up about the poor grammar of the manifestos the group produces on a daily basis, and a pair of what may be the stupidest beverage dispensers I have ever encountered. Those machines must be ancient. Any large weapons? Nothing as far as I can tell, though I suppose one of the beverage dispensers could go wild with a hot fluid nozzle. Great. I hate machine humor. Couldn't Lobo's programmers have skipped that part of the emotive work? Maybe I could focus him on the problem at hand. Lobo, if anything does go wrong, is there any help you can give me? Other than information, no. You are on your own. From my earlier conversations with him, I had known that fact, but I figured it couldn't hurt to ask one last time. Okay, I said. I'm going to stop transmitting and focus on them. Keep tracking me, but don't talk unless you see something I can't know. I need to focus. Okay? I understand. It is not like this is my first supporting role in a fight. First a joke, now pouting. Great. I was beginning to question the wisdom of my choices when I heard footsteps join the jungle noises. Sorry, signing off. I sat on the bottom of the pit in a spot bathed in starlight, spread my arms, palms up, stared at the lip of the hole closest to the sound, and waited. The first head appeared over the side a moment later, glanced down, and pulled back quickly. After a bit of hushed chatter, 3 heads peeked over the edge at the same time and then vanished from my view. I kept looking up. A voice came from just beyond the edge of the pit. "So you're the one Slake hired to get the girl back. What's your plan now?" Barnes had been as good as his word. However, he leaked the news to the gardeners. It had reached them in time. "No real plan," I said, "other than to ask you to give her to me." Several of the men laughed before the voice returned. "I don't think that's going to happen. We need her, and you have nothing to offer us." "Sure I do," I said. "Your lives and your safety. 6 of you are ringing this hole now. You're lightly armed." Lobo spoke in my ear. "Actually, only 5 are around the pit. One has stepped into the trees and is watering the bushes." Great. They taught him slang as well. Lobo was not helping me focus. "Correct that," I said. "One of you 6 is urinating. 12 more of you, along with a recorder and a pair of old beverage machines, are waiting back at your camp with the girl. None of you has any weaponry worth mentioning." The voices murmured. I couldn't make out the words, but I didn't need to. Their reaction was predictable and rational. I pressed on. "I'm telling you all this so you understand your situation. Imagine the kind of weaponry that's standard equipment on the machines I have monitoring you, and I think you'll see my offer has teeth. I don't care at all about you, because you're not my job. I was hired to get back the girl. Give her to me, and we'll let you walk away." I paused a moment, then took them the last step down the path. "Nothing you can do will change the fact that Kelko will have exclusive commercial rights to Mackin and the new aperture." More murmurs. "Yeah, it's a done deal. You can give me the girl, or Kelko's security goons will start jumping here tomorrow morning. The first squad should make the evening shuttle planet-side, though if they're in a hurry, they'll use a Kelko ship and get here sooner. Take me back to your camp so whoever runs your group can give me the girl, or you can face Kelko's troops no later than tomorrow night." "What if we kill you now?" asked a different voice. "When the posturing starts, you have only 3 viable alternatives. You can surrender to the bullying, but that wouldn't get me the girl, and so wasn't an option now. You can verbally spar with them and hope to win, but anyone dumb enough to talk to a captive in a pit instead of first lobbing a gas or concussion grenade into the hole.
This has been the Bane Free Radio Hour. Thanks for joining us at the heart of science fiction. Join us next week for part 11 of One Jump Ahead by Mark Van Name. Don't miss our next show when Sean Patrick Hazlett interviews John Ringo about his new novel, Not That Kind of Good Guy, the first in his new series. Score by Ruth Judkowitz.